How does a woman wake up in the wrong bed and still believe she is the victim of the story? How does one text, 2 words, nothing more, turn a single reckless night into the thing that costs you every version of the life you thought you owned? I believed I was only having fun, that excitement was something I deserved, and I never imagined that my husband's silence was not surrender. It was preparation. My name is Odessa Vane, and I am 32 years old, and I work as a wardrobe stylist at a boutique agency called Palette and Press, where my entire job is to make other people look like the best version of what they want to be. I understand surfaces the way some people understand numbers, the way a collar sits, how a hem falls, the exact amount of ease a jacket needs before it stops looking like a costume and starts looking like identity. I have been told I am good at this, and I believe it, because belief is part of the job. I also have a husband named Joel, who is 35 and works in product management at a software company, and who is steady in the way that a well-built house is steady, reliable, quiet, thoroughly himself. He was exactly what I wanted when I married him. By the night of the Aldrin Hotel rooftop mixer, he had become, in my own private accounting, exactly what I was tired of. The mixer was a styling industry event, the kind of evening where business cards move across cocktail napkins and everyone is simultaneously networking and performing the version of themselves most likely to be remembered. My friend Tamsin came with me, wearing orange, scanning the room before the elevator doors had finished opening. The rooftop had ambient lighting and potted olive trees, and that particular March air that was still deciding between winter and spring. I told Joel the event would end by 9. I told him not to bother with dinner. For 3 clubs in the district, and was for 3 clubs in the district, and was there about a brand activation. We talked about music and visual aesthetics, and the specific fantasy that nightclub environments perform. He said I had very precise opinions, and I said I had very precise taste, and Tamsin left at 8:40, and I stayed until 10:15. And when I left, Declan's number was in my phone under a first name only. Joel was in the living room when I returned, not waiting in a pointed way, just not yet at 8:30, and asked, gently, at 8:30, and asked, gently, whether everything was all right between them, because his sense was that something had shifted in recent weeks, and he would rather ask plainly than guess. He also mentioned the Aldrin Hotel bar coaster he had spotted tucked inside my bag's side pocket and asked whether the event had moved locations, because the coaster suggested I had stayed past the bar's opening hour rather than leaving from the boardroom as I had implied. He said he was not building a case. He just wanted to understand, and he offered to come to my next event if it would help him feel part of my professional world instead of outside it. I told him he sounded like he was reading significance into a drinks coaster, that the event had shifted floors mid-evening due to a double-booked room, and that professional events in creative industries did not run to the same timetable as software meetings. I went to shower. I did not feel guilty. I felt electric. 2 weeks after the Aldrin mixer, I had seen Declan 4 times. 3 visits were logged in my professional calendar as consultations. The 4th was not in any calendar at all. On a Thursday morning in the Palette and Press break room, I told Tamsin that Joel had been distant, just one of those cold season flatlines that long marriages sometimes hit. Neither of us noticed the break room door had not fully closed, and that our manager, Sylvie Park, had paused in the corridor outside for 15 seconds before continuing to the printer room. The following Saturday, I met Petra Cho for coffee at Café Linden. Petra had come into my orbit through Joel's workplace social group, which meant she belonged to both of us. She notices what is present in a frame and what is conspicuously absent, and she files observations before she names them. At some point, my phone lit up through the table surface, and I picked it up before the screen could register on her side. She did not ask about it, but minutes later she mentioned a tagged post on the Pulse Club story, since removed, and asked whether I had been there for a professional consultation. I said yes. She smiled carefully, one notch too deliberate to be casual. Midweek, Joel came home with a calm that felt new. He made his own coffee and drank it at the kitchen window without bringing me a cup. The first morning in 3 years he had not done that. Over dinner he asked about the pulse visit, and I could see by how he framed it that he had already found something. He mentioned the agency tablet, a draft email to Declan Marsh, time-stamped 11:23 p.m., containing a phrase, shared frequency, that did not read like a scope of work. I told him finding private communication in a draft folder and treating it as evidence was exactly the behavior that made women feel monitored in their own marriages. I got up from the table. The following morning, on the counter beside my work badge, sat a small piece of tape with a hexagonal ink shape, the Pulse VIP entry stamp found on a receipt in my coat pocket. He said honesty now would cost less than silence later. I picked up my badge and left. That evening, his phone showed a calendar notification before he silenced it. The folder labelled Household had moved to the locked drawer. I only discovered it was locked because I tried to open it. I told Joel on Thursday that the Friday Pulse event was a professional styling consultation, that Declan was running a launch night and needed my eye on the visual layout for a potential long-term branding project. Joel put his fork down without any drama and asked whether this was a professional visit or a social one. I said it was both, that professional relationships in creative industries had a social dimension, and that people outside those industries tended to read that as suspicious when it was simply how the work functioned. He said he would be home by 10 and asked if I would be back by then. I said probably not, these events ran late, and I would text. He nodded in a way that no longer looked like belief, but looked like acknowledgement, and went back to his dinner. Tamsin messaged at 6:15 that a migraine was building and she would probably not make it. I replied that it was fine, and went alone, and told myself it was fine. The club's entry point was a velvet rope and a digital check-in pad, and when the VIP stamp, that same hexagonal shape in fluorescent ink, went onto the back of my left wrist at 9:48 p.m., I did not think about the coat pocket receipt or the piece of tape on the kitchen counter. The bass from the soundstage moved through the floor and up through my shoes, and I let Declan walk me through the VIP section with the proprietorial ease he had for any room he controlled. And when a photographer for the club's social accounts asked if she could include me in the behind-the-scenes coverage, I said yes. I was standing close to Declan when the first shot was taken. I did not think about Joel. Around midnight, a group moved to the outdoor smoking terrace for air. I do not smoke, but I went because Declan went. The terrace looked out over the city's western district in orange and amber, and the March air was cold enough that people stood close together as a matter of natural physics. A woman with a press lanyard was taking wide atmospheric shots for a lifestyle feature, and she included me and Declan in 2 of them. His arm along the railing behind me, the city spread out behind us both. She tagged the club's story account and her own page at the same time. The post was live for 41 minutes before Declan asked her to pull it. 41 minutes is long enough for a mutual contact to screenshot something and save it in a dated folder. What happened between the terrace and the following morning, I am going to say plainly. I made a specific, deliberate choice. I was 32 years old and fully in possession of my own decisions, and I decided. The sequence, the rest of the VIP section, the rideshare from Pulse at 1:07 a.m., the drop-off at Declan's building address at 1:19, was a series of small steps I took because I wanted to take them, and I had told myself that wanting something was sufficient justification for having it. In the morning, the ceiling was lower than mine, the nightstand was glass, and on it a charging pad hummed a thin, barely audible vibration through the glass surface, steady and indifferent, and that was the first sound I processed before I was fully awake. My phone showed 7:22 a.m. Above the time, a notification from Joel, sent at 2:47 a.m. 2 words, no punctuation, no follow-up. I know. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to construct a workable narrative. I told myself 2 words were a bluff, that he had noticed I had not come home and was using certainty as a tactic to destabilize me. I told myself I had made deliberate choices and I remained in control of this situation. The hexagonal stamp on my left wrist was mostly faded, the fluorescent ink gone soft in the morning light. I pulled my sleeve down and called a rideshare. Joel was at the kitchen counter when I walked in, not waiting dramatically, just there, making coffee he brought only for himself. He turned when he heard the door and looked at me once, and the look was entirely new. Not hurt, not angry, just clear. I said I had stayed at Petra's after the event because it ran late. He did not respond to this. He picked up his coffee and went to the window. That evening he showed me his phone screen, not confrontationally, just indicating. And I could see his scene notification on the tagged terrace photo from before it was pulled, plus the outline of the reshared story screenshot. He asked who had taken the terrace photo and whether it was planned, and he asked why her rideshare receipt, the printed summary from her phone's travel record, showed a pickup from Pulse at 1:07 and a drop-off at an address that was not Petra's and was not theirs. He said if there was an explanation, he was willing to hear it. He also said he had been patient and had asked honest questions 3 times now and had received nothing that qualified as an honest answer, and he was not going to continue in that position indefinitely. He offered one more conversation that evening, not scheduled, not mediated, just immediate, where she could tell him whatever was true. I told him he had gone through my rideshare receipts without my consent, and that assembling a surveillance file on his wife's evenings was controlling in the specific way she had been trying to describe for months. I told him I was not going to answer questions posed by a husband who treated private logistics as evidence, and I went to the bedroom. He followed only as far as the doorway and asked once more, calmly without raising his voice, whether the residential keycard visible in the side pocket of my overnight bag, the bag I had taken to what was supposed to be a styling consultation, was something worth explaining. I said it was Tamsin's spare from last month. He said okay, and closed the door, and went to the second bedroom. At 11:14 that night, I heard the wooden resistance of a drawer fully closing in the room next door. In the morning, the faint smell of printer toner in the corridor near the second bedroom door told me something had recently been printed. Through the half-open door, a manila folder sat between 2 books on the desk, labelled Utilities 2024, and noticeably thicker than any utility file we had ever kept. On the shared family tablet that Saturday morning, the joint calendar showed 2 new entries in his handwriting. Aldrin, Monday, 9 a.m., and below it a digital note, readable only because the screen was tilted at the right angle. Print both before. Time-stamped at 11:22 the previous night. The Sunday Vane family lunch was a regular occasion, and we drove together because not driving together would have been a statement I was not yet ready to make. The drive was 23 minutes, and Joel drove carefully and said almost nothing, and the radio was on a jazz station he did not usually choose. His phone buzzed on the console, and the preview showed a single word, confirmed, from a contact saved under a blue dot emoji with no name attached. He read it and placed the phone face down and said nothing. Joel's mother Ruth met us at the door with the efficient warmth of a woman who had been a nurse for 30 years and could read a room in 4 seconds. She embraced Joel first with her hand on his back and 1 extra second of duration. Then she turned to me with a smile that was present and entirely unreadable. At the lunch table, Ruth, Iris, Marcus, his wife Danny, and the 2 of us, the conversation moved through safe channels for the first 20 minutes. Joel was quiet in a specific new way. He responded when addressed, he was warm to his siblings, and he performed no distress that would give me an opening to respond to. Iris asked how the styling work was going, and I said it was excellent, that I was expanding into club and event branding, which was an exciting new direction. She asked if that required a lot of evening work. I said yes, and then I made the decision, not accidental, not impulsive, and said that Joel had found it difficult to adjust to a schedule that did not revolve around his routine, and that I had spent considerable energy lately defending my professional identity from being misread as a personal failing. The table did not go loud. It went careful. Ruth moved her fork from one side of her plate to the other. Iris picked up her water glass. Marcus looked at Joel, not at me. And Joel looked at his food and said, in a level voice, that they were working through some things and appreciated the family not needing to take sides. Danny excused herself to check on the dessert. The sympathy I had been building toward for 10 minutes did not arrive. On the back porch after lunch, Marcus stood beside me with a coffee and looked at the yard for a moment before saying, without build-up, that Joel had seemed different recently and that different looked like prepared to him. He was not saying it to make her uncomfortable, he said, just so she knew. He put his coffee on the railing and went back inside before I could respond. The word prepared sat on the porch railing beside the mug after he left. Through the back door's glass panel, I could see Iris and Joel in the kitchen doorway, talking quietly. Her hand was on his forearm and his shoulders were settled. Not tense, just settled, the way someone looks when they are receiving confirmation of something they already understood. I went back inside before either of them turned around. That evening I called my mother and told her Joel had become controlling, that he checked my professional calendar and went through receipts, and that the marriage had started to feel like a monitoring relationship. My mother asked if I was happy. I said I deserved to be happy. She said that was not quite an answer, and she asked whether something had happened that had prompted the checking. I said that was his behavior, not mine. She said she was not assigning fault. She was asking whether something had changed. I ended the call and sat with what she had said for about 30 seconds, and then put it away. The following morning I sent a message to Tamsin, 2 other friends, and my cousin Blythe, telling them a version of events in which Joel's quiet behavior was a form of emotional punishment. His organized calm was passive aggression dressed as virtue. And I was a woman trying to hold a creative career together while her husband weaponized every unexplained evening. I did not mention Declan by name. I referred to someone he had decided was a threat. Tamsin, meaning to write her own summary to Petra, accidentally copied my message text and sent it to Petra's number directly. Petra read it again, and opened her phone folder. That Wednesday, Joel returned from the 4th Street financial appointment and moved 3 boxes of older papers from the hall closet to the 2nd bedroom. He updated the apartment's online maintenance portal with only his name as primary contact, citing administrative reorganization. He quietly removed his own active location share from the family app they had both used since the first year of their marriage. His side of the wardrobe now had 1 empty hanger space he had not mentioned. He asked her that evening to sit down, and he was already seated when he asked. On the table between them, he had placed a utility bill printout, the lease's utility section with both their names on it, and a pen beside it. He asked directly whether she intended to continue living in this apartment and whether she intended to continue in this marriage, because those were 2 distinct questions, and he needed honest answers to both before he could organize the practical details of the coming months. He said he had also been in contact with a professional mediator, not a mutual friend, a neutral professional, and he would attend all 3 initial sessions if she was willing. And he was offering that now, while the decision was still theirs to make together. Then he asked what the Declan Marsh professional relationship had produced in terms of confirmed bookings, agency invoices, or contract drafts. Because if it was the professional relationship she had described for 6 weeks, there would be at least 1 piece of paperwork, and he was asking to see a single email, 1 invoice, 1 scope of work. She called it business auditing. She said she had never been asked to produce receipts for her client relationships before, and that the question was designed to disqualify her career rather than understand it. She pushed the utility bill to the side. He stayed seated and placed his phone on the table, screen facing up, showing the terrace screenshot that Petra had taken. He said he was not showing it to argue about the photo. He was showing it because the image was now in at least 3 people's phones that he knew of. and whatever happened next was going to become visible to people they both cared about, and he was asking if she wanted to address it while it was still a private matter. She told him she was not going to sit across from a photograph as though it were a legal exhibit. He said he heard that, and he said she could call it whatever category fit her preferred narrative, but he was asking one last time as her husband, and he would listen without judgment if she chose honesty. This is when I shifted. I did not decide to shift. Or I decided, and then told myself I had not decided, which is the same mechanism I had been using for months. My voice changed. I let the tiredness show rather than the sharpness. I said I had been feeling invisible in the marriage for over a year. I said I was not justifying anything, only explaining that when a person feels unseen for long enough, they make choices that are not entirely rational, and I said I was sorry for that. I reached across the table and touched his hand. I said we could do the mediator. I said I needed him to try to understand. He was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then he removed his hand from mine, gently, without anger, and said he appreciated her saying it, and he would like to believe it. But the same offer had been made 3 weeks ago with different language, and had not been followed by a single concrete change. He said he would hold the mediator offer open, but he needed to see something different this week, one specific actual change, before he scheduled anything. He said he would give her until Sunday. She said Sunday, yes. She meant nothing by it. He knew it, and his face showed that he knew, and the room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when both people have said what needed to be said, and one of them has already made a decision the other cannot yet see clearly. That night, Tamsin called and said she had done something by accident. She explained the forwarded message and whose number she had sent it to. I said Petra's name, and Tamsin said yes. On the shared family tablet, a cloud sync pop-up faded from the screen before I could read the file name. On Monday morning, I passed Joel in the building parking garage. He was standing beside the passenger door of his car and looking at a single folded sheet of paper, which he tucked into the door's deep side pocket, the slot where he kept registration documents, before he turned and saw me. He said he had pushed back his Monday start by an hour, nodded, and walked to the elevator. Later that day, when I had the spare key and went to the car, the door pocket held only a parking stub dated that morning from the Aldrin Hotel's self-park garage, the same building I had walked into 4 months ago for the rooftop mixer, the same building whose lobby connects directly to the financial and legal district on 4th Street. On Tuesday afternoon, I went to Norview Systems without calling ahead. I stood in the wide glass atrium lobby and looked up at the second-floor corridor, visible through the interior window. And Joel was in a conference room, seated across from a woman in a grey blazer carrying a leather portfolio and a man reviewing a document on a tablet. Joel was listening, not speaking, with the organised stillness he had developed since his first quiet appointment. The woman slid a single sheet across the table, and he looked at it, folded it once, and placed it in the inner pocket of his jacket. Then the three of them stood, and the meeting was over. I walked back to the lobby entrance before any of them reached the elevator. Outside, the exhaust from a passing bus settled at the back of my throat and stayed there for 2 blocks. That evening, with Joel at his sister Iris's for dinner, I went to the second bedroom. The desk drawer was still locked. On the desk surface, a small black USB drive labelled in his handwriting with a date, the Monday after the Pulse night, sat in plain sight. I picked it up, turned it over once, and placed it back exactly as I had found it. The manila folder labelled Utilities 2024 sat between 2 books on the wardrobe shelf and was thicker now than the first time I had seen it. I did not open it. The smell of printer toner was faint in the room, not strong, just present, and I stood there long enough to understand that this room had been reorganised into something else weeks ago, and I had been narrating it as a guest bedroom because naming it accurately would have required naming everything else accurately too. Petra called Thursday morning and I let it ring twice before answering. She said she wanted to talk as a friend. She said she had been sitting on something for more than 2 weeks and could not hold it anymore. She told me she had the terrace photo, the rideshare check-in record from the Pulse VIP partner portal, the timestamp from the reshared story, and the message Tamsin had accidentally forwarded. She said she was not going to confront me and she was not going to approach Joel. He was clearly handling things in his own way. But she was telling me so I would stop being surprised. She said she cared about both of us and would not lie if someone asked her directly. I told her what she had was photographs from a professional event and a rideshare record confirming attendance at a client launch, and that the story reshare had been removed because it was taken without consent. She said she heard me, and she said she hoped I was okay, and she ended the call without malice, which made it harder to be angry at than an accusation would have been. That Friday evening, Joel was in the living room with a book he was not reading, and I sat down across from him and told him he was right that something had happened with Declan. I did not say what, specifically. I said I had allowed the friendship to become emotionally inappropriate, and I recognized it had crossed a line, and I was sorry for that. Not a full apology, calibrated, offered with just enough specificity to sound honest, and just enough vagueness to contain what was actually true. I watched his face. There was a short stillness, and then he nodded, not with relief, not with softness, but with the precision of someone receiving a data point they had already factored into their model. He said he appreciated that. Then he asked whether the crossing of that line was limited to the emotional dimension, or whether there was a physical dimension she was not including. I said it was emotional. I kept my voice level and my eyes steady. He said okay, and he closed his book, and he got up and went to the kitchen for water. And when he came back, he sat down and said, in a tone that was entirely flat, that the mediator appointment was no longer something he was going to schedule. Not from anger, he said, from arithmetic. He said he hoped she was genuinely all right. He said he was going to handle things properly, and he said it the way you say the name of a process. Not as a threat, not as a performance, just a factual description of the next step. I asked what properly meant. He said she would know in due course. He turned his water glass between his hands once, slowly, and set it down, and said he was going to bed. I followed him to the hallway and said his name. He turned. His jacket was hanging on the hallway hook, and I could see the rectangular outline of the folded page in the inner pocket, visible as a thickness in the fabric. He asked me one thing. Did I want to be honest right now in this hallway with no calculation behind it? Just the actual truth about what had happened and why. He said if I could tell him the address on the rideshare drop-off record from the Pulse launch, just the address, nothing else, he would know they were finally having a real conversation. He said this was the last time he was going to ask, and he genuinely wished it had gone differently. I said I was not going to dignify a quiz question about a street address. I said he had already decided what he believed, and the question was theatre. He said goodnight, and he turned off the hallway light and went to the second bedroom and closed the door with a sound that was entirely ordinary. A door closing in a house at the end of an evening, which is the most final kind of sound there is. In the morning, the lighthouse magnet, the one I had bought on a coastal trip before we were married, was gone from the refrigerator door. The wall where it had been was clean. On the kitchen counter, his phone showed a calendar notification before he silenced it. Norview Lobby, Friday, 10:30 a.m. He picked up the phone and the USB drive from the desk, placed both in the inner pocket of his jacket, and did not look at me. By Thursday night, I had decided I needed to reach Joel before whatever properly meant arrived. The controlled bargain had not worked because he had not accepted it as currency. The final hallway attempt had failed because I had refused his last honest question. The only remaining option was to find him in a space outside our apartment, a public space where his calm would need to contend with the social self-regulation of his professional environment. The calendar notification had told me he had something at the Norview lobby at 10:30 Friday morning. I arrived at 10:20, gave my name at the reception desk as a visitor for Joel Vane, and sat in one of the low chairs in the waiting area with my bag on my lap. At 10:28, a man in a dark jacket entered through the glass doors and gave a name to the receptionist. She made a brief call, then looked at the seated area and said my name, not as a page to Joel's floor, but as a confirmation. Was I Odessa Vane? I said yes. The process server walked to where I was sitting and said my full name clearly, in the precise tone of someone completing a procedural step, and handed me a brown envelope with my legal name, our apartment address, and a civil court reference number printed on the outside. He noted my receipt on his clipboard and left. The lobby did not pause. The coffee station dripped. An elevator bell pinged. The receptionist returned to her screen. Two people near the door continued discussing a vendor deadline. I sat with the envelope on my lap and understood, with a clarity that needed no interpretation, that the Norview lobby, Friday 10:30 a.m., calendar entry, had never been Joel's appointment. It had been mine. He had known I would come to his building when I had run out of other options, and he had arranged for me to be served in the one place he was certain I would arrive voluntarily. The elevator bell pinged again, and Joel stepped out, crossed the lobby, signed in at security, and walked toward the meeting suite corridor without looking back. The glass door closed behind him, and it had no window. In the adjacent Aldrin Hotel lobby, the building where I had first met Declan at the rooftop mixer, the precise starting point of everything. I sat down and opened the envelope. The formal divorce petition had been filed 2 days prior. The motion requested a freeze on joint credit accounts pending asset division, temporary exclusive use of the apartment during separation, and named a first hearing date 4 weeks from today, a Thursday at 9:15 a.m. Behind the petition, a schedule of assets initialed and dated from records spanning 3 weeks after the Pulse night forward. Bank statements, joint credit history, the apartment lease. Every document was accurate, every date was current. What I had believed gave me freedom. The choices I made in rooms where Joel was not present, the decisions I owned because I made them with open eyes, the performance of a woman too alive to be contained, turned out to be the exact material required for every document in the manila folder I had never opened. The things I thought were private were the things that had created the record. The energy I spent building an image, a woman honest enough to take what she wanted, was the same energy that made everything I said afterwards sound precisely like what it was. Rehearsed. I thought the word exciting protected me. It did not protect me from a calendar, a rideshare receipt, a hexagonal ink stamp, and a mutual friend who does not lie. Closure snapshot. The hearing date came and passed with the ordinary procedural speed of things already decided. The financial orders were confirmed, and the apartment transfer was finalised within the agreed timeline. Petra met me once at Café Linden, the same steam wand, the same brick wall, and we sat for 40 minutes and said almost nothing of substance, which was the most honest conversation I had managed in some time. The joint credit card declined at a styling materials supplier one morning, and the assistant looked at the card reader very professionally, and I took the card back and said nothing. Declan's number rang 4 times the first time I called, and after the 6th message the read receipts stopped appearing. Tamsin sent a birthday message in November with no follow-up. I replied with one line. The short-let room above the dry cleaning business smelled of solvents in the evenings, and I learned to sleep through it, which is the most practical thing I managed in months. The lighthouse magnet, I understood much later, had always been mine. He had not taken it. I had simply never looked for it.